Hey guys. So recently I've been exploring a bunch of hard surface techniques and whatnot, and trying to see how video game guys work versus film or visual effects guys. And so I discovered actually a while ago Decal Machine, and I thought I'd buy it. So I got it, and then I found that there's sort of like a lack of documentation. I mean, it's there, but there's no step by step on how to use it. So I used it for a little bit, and I thought I would make a video on generally how it works. So that's what this is going to be about. So first let's talk about the actual installation. So what I did is I've downloaded the Decal Machine zip file, which you can see here. So this PC downloads Decal Machine version, whatever version you have, and then .zip. And inside of this zip there should be a Decal Machine folder. This is the folder that you're going to want to copy. So Control C, and that's going to put it into the clipboard. And then what you do is you go into here, so C users, whatever user your name is, and then app data, roaming, Blender Foundation, Blender 2.78 in this case, because that's the version that's required. And then what I had to do is I had to make a scripts folder. So in here, inside of 2.78, I had to make the scripts folder. I went inside it and I made two more folders, add-ons and modules. So inside of the add-ons, I pasted the Decal Machine. And then what I did is I went inside it, because there's one more folder that I had to, or one more zip file that I had to unzip. So under pill win64.zip, I had to unzip this, right? So I just basically did this, where I did zip and then extract to pill win64, and then that made this folder. I took whatever contents were in here, Control C or Control V, whatever, and then I went back to scripts inside of here. So scripts. I made another folder, like I said, modules, and then I just pasted that in here. Once you've done that, you can essentially start playing with Blender. So I loaded Blender, I went into user preferences, and then under add-ons, I typed in Decal, and then that brought up this, enabled it, and you're ready to go. So before we do anything, I think we should model this geometry just a little bit. Let's reshape it, let's give it a bevel or something like that. So press tab to enter the edit mode, and then try to select something. And as you can see right now I'm in vertex mode. Press Control tab and then choose face. Start selecting some faces and reshape it. Something like that. Now if we press A, it's going to deselect. If we press A again, it's going to select everything. Control B to get into bevel mode, and as you're dragging the mouse you'll get something like that. So I'll get to about this point and then use the scroller to bevel and left click, and that's it. So now if you press A, we deselect, and we're good. Press Control Tab, or rather press Tab to get out of the edit mode, and then A to deselect everything. So you have something like this. Now as you can see right now there's a bunch of faceting on this object and it doesn't look really nice. If you right click to select, and then you go to Tools, Smooth Shading, so Shading Smooth, you'll see that it'll fix the normals. If you go to Flat, you'll see that it looks ugly again. So smooth, and it's all good. Okay, so now here's the thing. So Decal Machine, if I just deselect this, if I press D when nothing is selected, you'll notice that I get this kind of pie menu. When I select an object and I press D, I get a slightly different menu. So just know which mode that you're in or what you have selected, and Decal Machine will do something different. So in order for us to start, in order for us to do anything to this object, the first thing that I like to do personally, because there's a tiny bug inside of Decal Machine, and that is if you start working on this object right away and then get a material onto this object, it's actually going to be purely black. But if you duplicate this object and then apply the material onto the duplicate, it will magically work. So what I like to do is I like to just press Shift D to duplicate, left click, and just leave it in its place. So as you can see here in the scene editor or the outliner, you'll see that there is a cube and cube 001. So cube 001 is the duplicate, and then or the original cube is this one here. So I want to use the original cube as the cutter and this as the geometry that I'm going to be working on. So if I just use the cutter and then I reshape it or move it to a different location and then do something like that, maybe select all, scale, I don't know, something like that. So I'm just going to move it into location, and then I'm going to very simply get out of the edit mode again. So now I have selected this object, shift click, right click onto the geometry that we're going to be cutting away from. So basically this object is going to do the cutting, and this will be the object that we're working on. Now if you press D, you'll have this menu. So the first thing we want to do is we want to go to Decal Slice, and you'll see something like that. And what this is wherever that object intersected with this one, with the working geometry, it left a bunch of polygons behind. So these are polygons that are actually drawn on top of the surface. So these are not a part of this model at all. Because now what I could do is if I just hide this object, you'll see that, see, I've just hidden the cube, and now what we have is we have only the polygons visible that were newly created. Now, in order for us to see how this looks when it's rendered, or the texture inside of the viewport, just a few things. We could go over here and choose material, and then deselect, and you're not going to see much yet. Let's see what it looks like when it's textured. And again, you're not going to see much just yet. Let's change it to cycles render, and now you're finally seeing some kind of material on this strip. Okay, that's cool. But again, this isn't exactly what we want, not just yet anyways. So let's select this thing here. Let's press D, and let's initialize base material. So at the very least, this object here, the slice, and this will have the same material. And now, because the cycles renderer is on, which is what this plugin is meant to be used with, now we can go over to here and choose from texture to rendered, and you'll get a result like that. Now here's the thing, as I'm middle clicking to navigate around, you'll notice that it's refining the result, and then it gets rough again while I'm tumbling, and then it refines again. If you have a good GPU, or if you have multiple GPUs, what you probably should do is under rendered right here. You should go to device and change it from CPU to GPU compute. And now, when you do this, notice how fast it is. So it'll be rough while you're navigating, but as soon as you let go, or as soon as you stop, it refines within like a second. So this makes it a lot easier to work with. So in my case, I have 2 Titans, so it's pretty fast. Now, while I'm working, I can't actually, I shouldn't be in rendered mode, so I'm going to go back and go into something like textured, and I'll continue working. So here's the thing. Right now, as you can see, my target is over here. And if I deselect and I press D again, I'll be given this pie menu, in which case I'm going to choose one of these inserts, and maybe I'll choose something like that over here. And whoa, nothing happened. Well, that's because the newly created geometry, the new decal, is actually created at the target, at the origin, or wherever this 3D cursor is. So I'm just going to bring it up, and as you can see, it did actually make it. If I scale it up, you'll see that there is in fact a texture applied to it. But I want to apply this object on top of this one. So Control, or actually start dragging, and then press Control, and it'll snap it to that piece of geometry. So maybe I want it to have it somewhere closer to the middle, and something like that is good. And now let's create another one, but again, we have to deselect whatever we're working on right now. So press A to just deselect, press D, and let's click on something else. So in this case, I'm going to click on one of these things here. And now this time, because our cursor was moved over, so whenever you left click, you'll notice you'll move over the 3D track, 3D cursor, and that's where the decal will be created. So now if I press D again, no, see, right now I have selected this one, so I can't actually do that just yet. So if I deselect it and then I press D, I can select a different kind of decal. Let's just select this one, and as you can see, it snapped over to that direction. So let's take this decal here, and let's start dragging and press Control. And as you can see, it's going to snap to the surface of the object that we're interested in. And maybe, yeah, actually this will be pretty good. This will be a good example for what it is that I want to do with this. So I'm going to scale it up and move it around until I get something like that. But in this case, I'm actually going to want to, actually, you know what, let me just move it over to this end. Oh, no, not like that, not at all like that. You know what, let me just undo that until it's nice and flat. Alright, something like that. So I'm going to move it around, maybe scale it up, and then eventually I'm going to want to rotate that texture, and I'll show you exactly how to do that very soon. So I'll move one of them here, and then I'll maybe move this one over like so, maybe even rotate it around the Z-axis, kind of like that, and then I'll Shift D to duplicate it, and then move it over on the Y. I think that's pretty good. And you know what, let's try rendering it just for shits and giggles here. So I'm going to render it, and you'll see that it looks like that. But oh, this looks pretty ugly. I mean, it looks okay from one point of view, and all these ones look okay for the most part. But this one, from a certain point of view, it looks really ugly. So we have to fix that. We have to actually project this onto this piece of geometry. Let me go back over to the textured mode, and now we're going to select this object, and we're going to then select Shift, right-click, select this, the geometry that we're going to project it onto, and then press D. And now we're going to choose Decal Project, and it'll do just that. So now what it's actually done is after it projected, it actually created just enough segments to project that geometry smoothly across that surface. Again, let's try rendering it. Let's see what we get. And that's pretty cool. As you can see, you see all sorts of parallaxing happening, and it looks very, very nice. And we haven't done any modeling. I mean, imagine like if you had to model all this, it would take you so long to do. So in order for us to make this easier, or rather what the developer has done, is I'm just actually going to deselect everything, and I'm going to press D. And the first thing I'm going to do is change the decal projection depth, and I'm going to make it just a little bit bigger than the last number. So instead of 10, I'm going to make it like 10.02. So now that we have that, I'm going to now go to create a single plane, and move it over here. And then I'm going to go to edit, go to edge, move it over to this spot. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that this edge kind of goes over to about this point here. So about the center line of that slice. And same thing on this end. So right click, I'm taking this edge and I'm going to move it over to just about that point. So now that we have this geo, I'm going to make sure that first of all I select it. Then I shift right click, select the geometry that we're going to be cutting from, and then press D. And this time I'm going to go to Decal Knife. And it failed. And why did you fail again? This is so frustrating sometimes. See, for some reason it actually works sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't. So let's see exactly what's going on here. Maybe it doesn't like these loops here. So if I do that and I select, let's see what happens if I do Decal Knife. And for some reason it seems to be working. Boo. Okay, you know what? So let me just do something like this, where I'm actually going to shrink this temporarily. Unfortunately, I have to do this temporarily, so it kind of sucks. Because I think what's happening is it's trying to reproject against these edge loops here, and I don't think it really likes it. So you know what? Let's now try this. So we have this piece of geo, we have this piece of geo. Let's press D, and let's go to Decal Knife. And once again, it seems to fail. See, I don't understand why it failed exactly in that position. Because if I do it here, and I do that, Decal Knife, again, it's failing over there. And again, I don't understand why. Because if I did it over here, which is kind of silly to be honest, if I did it here, it works. See, I think it's just another one of those bugs, to be honest. So let's see if this is going to work. So now I'm going to take this piece of geo, and you know what, let's recenter the pivot over to this object. And I haven't actually done this in a while, so I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Where is it? Where are you? So I'm going to go to 3D cursor, bounding box center. I know what it is that I'm looking for, I just haven't done it in so long. Okay, so click and drag, and as you can see, it's way off from where I need it to be, unfortunately. So I will most likely actually end up just projecting it against this geometry, which sucks, and it's exactly not what I wanted to do in this case. But this will work as well. Okay, so we have this piece of geo here, and I'm actually just going to right click here, press D, and Decal Project. And again, it seems to be really freaking ugly. What the hell? Okay, whatever. You know what? This obviously is still beta software, I'm guessing. Okay. So now what I'll do is I'll just select these two vertices here. I'm just going to stretch them over here. Stretch these ones over to about here. And now I'm going to start modeling. So as you can see here, right now, I am actually a tiny bit over that piece of geo there. So eventually I'm actually going to have to move it right up against it as close as possible. Okay, but the one thing, if I now render, you'll see that there's a shadow, there's all this stuff, and it looks not very nice. So we'll have to fix that. But first, before we fix anything, let's press K to go into Slice, and let's start slicing this around to give me something like that, and enter, and then press Shift Tab, Face, and select, delete, faces, and now as you can see this line kind of merges with this one. That's kind of what I want, and I want to do the same thing on this end as well. So again, Shift Tab, make sure that this line kind of intersects with that one right there, and you know what, you can always use the orthographic by pressing 5 on the number pad, and then just play around with 1, 2, 3, 7, right? So in this case 3 is the front view for me, and I'm just going to intersect it just like so, and start moving these vertices kind of like that. Maybe I might actually want to go a little bit over, and now press K and start slicing and dicing. Press enter, go into face, select these two, delete those faces, and now those lines are perfectly intersecting. So again, the one thing that we still have to deal with is the fact that this line is perfectly floating above that. So if I press A, and I just start moving it back until it just about intersects, it should be okay. Let's see what it looks like when it's rendered. That looks okay-ish. As you can see, now it's actually intersecting there. There is a tiny bit of a shadow line. You can fix it by just making sure that you tweak your numbers, or whether you bring it a little tiny bit closer to the surface, and then you'll get around that whole shadow problem. But as you can see, that's pretty much how you would do the cuts, because otherwise, if this surface is going to be above this, then what you'll get is you'll have, you know, some ugliness happening around the corners, and you're going to get overlap, and this line, basically, if you hadn't done that cut like that, then what would have happened is this line would have gone over past here, and then this line would have terminated and then restarted below this one here. So sometimes you have to play around with, you know, the depth sorting. But anyways, that seems to work just fine. So that's pretty much it. I mean, as far as this plugin is concerned, I mean, like, I could work on this and make it look prettier, but I mean, the whole point of this video is really just to kind of show you, you know, some of the options that are available. Now, the other thing I guess I could show you is if I go over again, back to textured, is if I create another cube. So let me just bring it up here. So if I create an object like that, and then move it over like so. So if I select this and I select that, actually, you know what? Let me just press D. Now, panel decal width. If I increase this number, no, I want to decrease that bloody number. So you know what? Let me just deselect everything, press D. So if I deselect or change the number here, let's just change it to like 10. Select D, and then Decal Slice. You'll see that the actual decal, like this actual slice, is just a little bit thicker than the last one. And you can go pretty crazy with that, with the number there. So let's try that again with a different number. So again, let's try a cube. Let's move it over like that. And again, we don't want to intersect one object with another because we don't want any kind of trouble. So press D. Let's change it to 20. Select D, Decal Slice. And as you can see, it is in fact, what's going on here? Okay. And it is in fact thicker than this one here. So that's another thing that's possible with this plugin, is that you can actually change the width or the thickness of these cuts as well. And remember, if you deselect this and then you press D, okay. So the other thing that you should mention, or I should mention rather, is that over here, what you could do is you could actually change the line types that you're using for the actual decal slices. So whenever you slice or use knife, you can actually change what it is that you are using, right? What kind of line. And then the other cool thing is that you also have some kind of decals here, which have words and logos and things like that. And these ones don't necessarily create any kind of depth. There's no parallax. It's just flat out paint. So in our case, what I could do is, like, let's just say I create one of these. So let's just pick one, I don't know, one of these warning signs, start dragging, press Control, do something like that. Maybe even rotate this object. So I'll start rotating, and as I'm pressing R, I'm actually going to note the X axis. So as I'm pressing R, I'm going to press X on my keyboard to give me something like that. And while I'm pressing Control, it's going to lock. So there you go. So now we have a decal over there. Now the other thing I could probably mention is that, let's just say I don't like the way this is oriented right here, and I want to change this texture, right? Because maybe I don't want this to go sideways. Maybe I want this to go kind of like in a downward fashion. What I could do is actually just affect the texture, or rather the UVs in this object. So if I go take my mouse and move it over to over here, I want to change my view to the UV view. So go over here, this little cube here, and change it from the 3D view over to the UV image editor, and you'll get something like that. When you press tab, you'll see something along those lines, and right now I have everything selected. So if I just press R and then I use Control, as you can see, I can actually rotate the UVs of that object, and my texture has been affected. So now if I go over back into rendered, it'll be done exactly how I want it to be rendered. And as you can see, the decals on top, this one is fixed, the orientation of it is fixed. I have one cut here looking like that. I have another one that's a little bit wider. All right, so this one's nice and thin, this one's a little thicker. So yeah, that's pretty much how this plugin works. Pretty neat, huh? And I mean, it really didn't take that long to model either, and I'm actually explaining things, right? I mean, if you were to model things manually, you could do it pretty bloody fast. The one thing that's actually not working out so well is this thing here. I'm not really sure why that is, but you know what? I'm new to this plugin. I just wanted to show how it works, you know? Anyways, I'm done.